Hello, everybody. It's Sarah Boothby, Sojourn Psychology, and I'm here with David Hayward, the Naked Pastor. So, Naked Pastor, longtime friend of our blog, has been on a couple of times before. We've talked about love. We like talking about love. Dave,
Yeah,
yeah, David's like the love doctor.
yeah, more about love.
Yeah, more
All
about
about
love.
love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I like there's I just before we hopped on, I was saying to David, like there's so many interesting things that you are in your wheelhouse with all these things about inclusiveness and the importance of love and that there's so much belonging for people. But one of the things that I was curious to hear you speak about is this important term of what is affirming, like how to be affirming, what is the importance of affirming.
hmm Well, me talking to a psychologist about that.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah. Well, really, if affirming is the action of love, really. Um, I I get interviewed a ton about being affirming and all that kind of thing, and a lot of people have questions, and many people are stuck in the binary realm of right and wrong, righteous and unrighteous, sacred and secular, holy, unholy, evil, good, sinful and saintly, and sorry about that. And um, where many of us grow up in that sort of a binary division between, darkness and light and everything. And I remember it was kind of like a flash of insight or whatever when I realized that love isn't it's not just a feeling. Now love can be a feeling, but or have feelings. But when I realized that love it just exists, it changed everything. And what provoked me to thinking that way, or that sort of flash of insight came when um actually I was out in the woods just sort of meditating on a log, and it suddenly dawned on me, when in the gospels, when it said that Jesus says that the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, and the sun shines on the unjust and just alike. And that's what love is. That's what love does. It's like sun, it's like rain, and they might not have known what gravity was back then, but it's like gravity. It's indiscriminate. And so if love is indiscriminate and it's not based on feelings or preferences, and it just is, then affirmation has to be the expression of that,
Beautiful.
right? Because the sun is affirming on everyone it shines on. It doesn't discriminate. When rain falls on everyone, it affirms everyone. Gravity affirms everything. It doesn't discriminate. And I think love is that same kind of force, and it just exists. It just is. And I think that's the glue of everything. So that's why affirmation for me is, of course, kind of conclusion to that.
Yeah, and I like that even that term, of course, like affirmation is of course. And the indiscriminate,
Hmm.
that love, yeah, so many things, and how we polarize things. So this is important, and when we start to deconstruct and to entertain, like even what love is.
Huh.
But the culture, we're in such a culture of polarizing that there's categories.
Hmm.
So I've heard William Paul Young say that categorizing is another, it can be a definition of hell.
Hmm.
But it's interesting. So I don't know. My thought right now, I just started a new book by Thomas Merton, War in a Postmodern Era. It's a beautiful book, very hard to find. And
I
he's
have it.
starting, you, isn't it fabulous?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course you have
I
it.
have it.
It's
Well, yeah, anything Merton to me is one of my hugest mentors. I've never
oh,
met him, but for me, he was a huge, profound influence on my life. So, and beginning with the Seven-Story Mountain, but
yeah.
yeah, just profound influence on my life. Yeah.
Me too, and it's funny too, because I was thinking about you actually as I'm reading Thomas Merton, and I feel like Merton helped me discover myself in a way that I'm more of a contemplative. I don't fit anywhere. I don't
Hmm.
really fit with the psychologists. I don't really fit with the theologians. And then I was like, oh, that's like David. Sorry if you didn't know, but that's I don't know if you
You're
fit
right.
into a clear
You're right.
category.
You're right. I don't fit anywhere, but I can go everywhere. Like I
Yeah.
can work with psychologists and theologians and so on, but not any one group can fully embrace me as a member. Same with
Yeah.
the church. Same with the church. Like
Yes.
I'm skating all around the church, but there isn't a church, that would um, embrace me. Well, maybe there are, but it's that weird thing that happens when you start understanding that we're all connected on a deep and fundamental level,
Yeah.
and that love is what binds us. Geez,
Yes.
we sang hymns about that. And then you realize you're not an exclusive member of any one thing. You can't be. You realize you're a member of the universe.
Yeah.
Sounds really trippy and new agey, but and corny, but I think it's true.
I think so too. And I mean, Merton does such a good job of this idea of affirming and how complicated it is because of the polarization in the world. Like that, the war in Gaza, that people feel like they have to figure out which side they're on. There's this need to know, what do I believe? And that is such a fundamental flaw. It makes peace and love very hard to navigate when everybody's trying to figure out what side they're
Yeah.
on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when there are clear cases of um, perpetrator and victim, make
Yeah.
taking sides of course makes sense. But yeah, so we're living in a world, like you say, that's becoming more and more divisive. Lines are being more clearly drawn, lines of division and separation, and uh, and it for me, the challenge now is when somebody says, "Well, obviously you don't love, a fundamentalist or whatever." Well, yeah, like I do, but it doesn't mean I have nice, warm, fuzzy feelings about that person, or that I would care to work together with that person, or that we agree on everything. That's another issue. That's
Yeah.
how to form community and relationships, but that doesn't negate love, right? So for me, love is this universal power or force or reality that we can participate in. For me, we don't we I'm working. It's counterintuitive, but I think it's wrong to approach unity as if we have to create unity,
Yeah.
um, because then you're going to require people to conform and agree and all this. For me, I believe the best way is that we're already one, and we need to figure out how to negotiate walking this life together, living this life together. It's
Yeah.
already established that we are one. And, you know, I mean, if I want to pull scripture in, I could, where it says there's now no dividing wall between us. But people are constantly trying to create those dividing walls, and lines of division and separation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It makes it really hard, that, and it really, well, again, with like the affirming, the action of love is affirming and peace. I think that peace is a result of loving
Mhm.
when it's done right. But it is really hard in this in society the way it is, where there's devotion to absolute thinking.
Mhm.
Because I think maybe this is a fresh thought, but sometimes we view conversations about love and peace, inclusion, affirming as naive, like
Mhm.
that there's just like, oh, fluffiness, but it's actually really not fluffy at all to fall headlong into the expansion of love.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Like I've been hearing lately that some pastors. I was just on a podcast yesterday where they were talking about one pastor was approached by his congregation when he had preached on the Sermon on the Mount, and he was chastised for preaching a woke Jesus and a weak Jesus, and a Jesus that encouraged forgiving and walking the extra mile and turning the other cheek and generosity and all this kind of thing. Is a woke weak Jesus. So yeah, there is seems to be that trend today away from working to make love manifest in our society, and instead, a lot of people seem to relish division and fighting, and it. I think it's very unfortunate, and I think if we always depended on a warm, fuzzy feeling to love somebody, then we'd be way worse off than we already are. I think realizing that love already exists between us and that we're already one and united, and then working to make that, um, you know, uh, to practice that and to be able to live together in peace. I think that's what's. I think that's where the work is required.
Yeah. And it
And
is, or go ahead.
no, no, it's okay.
Okay. I just love what you're saying. And I think of part of what you said previously, and now, like with Ram Dass says, we're all just walking each other home. And I don't have to, maybe an ultra fundamental list or something like that, or somebody who is very absolute devotion to war is not somebody I want to walk beside. But I
Mm-hmm.
can love that we're all walking together. It's just love doesn't mean no boundaries. Love doesn't mean no um I think I'm very loving, but I'm out of relationship with some people.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it's confusing, but it's also important to say, like, there's a place to be out of relationship, and that is within love.
Yeah, we have to love ourselves too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another factor in my opinion is making love work and making love visible also means bringing no harm to anyone and
Yeah.
ensuring that no harm is brought to anyone else. Living in a peaceful world, in peaceful societies. It's kind of like I have a hanging Zen, um, uh, kind of like a scroll on cloth, and it goes something like this: for peace to be in the world, there needs to be peace in the country, and in order to have peace in the country, there needs to be peace in the city, and in order to have peace in the city, there needs to be peace in the home. In order for there to be peace in the home, there needs to be peace in my heart, and that's where it begins. And the fact that there's so much, I believe the reason there's so much division and conflict in the world is because there's division and conflict in our hearts. And if everybody would work on themselves and work on their traumas and work on their uh, inner conflicts and face their demons and so on, then we would be less likely to lash out and project all these things on other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Thomas Merton would agree.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
would,
I
right?
mean, there's a ton of projection going on where if we're not at peace in our hearts, our lives are going to be, there's not going to be any peace in our lives and in our relationships. We have to have peace in our hearts. It starts right here.
Yeah.
It emanates outwards.
I think that's why it's so important that you do what you do. And I like with Merton and the inner experience, and he's talking about contemplation, and he's like, people contemplate into the television. They don't realize that they're sort of in a meditative state. And then I just think of that. I think it's an important visual. We get sucked into social media, we get sucked into a TV
Mm-hmm.
program, and we are contemplating, we're having a spiritual experience. So then we have people like, the Naked Pastor or Brad Jerzak or, hopefully me, who are putting a pause on the social media crap to
Mm-hmm.
pull people up. And you do really cheeky things
Yeah.
that evoke emotion. Um, and I think that's really important work.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I try to do things that are, I do some longer videos and things like that on my YouTube channel, but um I try, like with my cartoons, for example, I try to do it in one frame with as few words as possible. Or if I make a TikTok video or a reel on Instagram or whatever, I try to make them really short so that it's like it hits you
Yeah.
immediately, like without, like my cartoons, you can absorb in 1 second. And hopefully that will uh, startle some people from their apathy, or maybe it will soften some people and help them realize that they're loved and cared for, or anything. So yeah, I'm throwing those things out every day, several times a day, very busy, um, just trying to shake things up a bit,
Yeah.
break our patterns.
I think that's good. And I think you do. I saw the background of my computer right now is the paper chain with
Oh yeah.
the flame at the end.
Yeah.
And I love meditating on that image. And it's to me it's really important. And it fits with this. Like, love is a flame. The fire belongs to God, in my opinion. And so we can use love to light fire, or we can use power and hate.
Hmm. Hmm.
What will intoxicate us, love or hate? Well, love or power, I think. That's my theory right now. It's power is at the root of our longing to be God. I
Yeah.
don't want to trust God, so I'd like it that I'm God and I'll make my own fire.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
that's my sort of take on why war happens. People
Yeah.
are just wanting to play God. We don't trust.
Yeah.
Our hearts are divided. We have no peace in our hearts. All these things that you're bringing together here.
Yeah,
Um,
that paper chain cartoon, it's maybe for people who haven't seen it, it's how we used to do cutouts of people in a paper chain, and the one at the head of the chain is chasing the one at the tail of the chain with a lighter, and he wants to set that paper person on fire, not realizing that it's eventually going to get around and burn him too.
yeah,
That's I feel a picture of vengeance and revenge and hate
yeah,
and so on. That it just keeps perpetuating itself,
yeah,
and somebody has to break that chain. And hopefully it starts with me and starts with you, where we love and we forgive and we work for the manifestation of love and affirmation in the world. It surprises me still that there are people and churches and so on, and even states and provinces or whatever, governments, who want to draw a line in the sand about who is in and who is out. They want to
yeah,
continue discrimination, and um, not realize, well, maybe they do realize that when people are discriminated against, they become targets and receive a lot of hate and violence. And, somebody has to break that cycle. And I'm hoping to do that with my work.
I think it's so good. And I find that your cartoons about fundamental Christian sex are very uncomfortable for me, but they're also really good for me
Yeah.
because of there's like I think just North American people as well are so influenced by sort of Puritan views of sexuality. And
Hmm.
so the shock value of those cartoons, and you'll say people can get the message in a second. I find that I your cartoons I will think about and be like, oh, like why is that uncomfortable for me?
Yeah. Yeah, those I call them sexy Sunday cartoons. I've been doing them all this year, challenging purity culture.
Yeah.
And they are, they're cute in my opinion, and they're pretty PG, there's nothing being seen, but it's obvious, there's sex involved and whatever, or about to, or finished or whatever. But every time I post one of those cartoons, I lose a ton of followers. And so I'm faced with the challenge. Okay, do I keep posting these and lose followers, or do I listen to the people who are reaching out to me saying, you have no idea how important these cartoons are for me, and they're healing me, like they really are literally helping me recover from the damage purity culture has done to me. And so and it's weird because if I buckled to the people who say, I can't believe you're cartooning about sex, or, this is too risque, or, whatever, then I'm actually bowing to purity culture too.
Yeah.
And purity culture is won again by silencing and shaming sex and talking about sex, and helping people heal from unhealthy sexual attitudes and ideas. So anyway, yeah,
It's important and it is I mean we're starting to have more voices for speaking up for you know safe enjoy emotionally safe sex.
hmm,
But it's an important thing for Christians, and it's hard. I mean, like we're people, and it's a little bit lonely to not fully have your tribe, even though you're fully included.
hmm.
But it is sad, and it hurts feelings when you lose followers and things like that. And then it's this again, the spiritual experience of like yeah, saying something important is the important thing.
Yeah,
That if what you do is so important, your art, your voice, and you're cheeky, and so people get mad at you.
yeah, they do. I mean, I do get a lot of, hate, or, criticism, or judging, or condemnation, or whatever. Um, Sometimes I even make fun of those, but I get a lot of positive feedback as well. I
Yeah.
know a lot of people are being served well, and so that that makes it all worth it to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. And I mean, um, it is, again, love is not a fluffy thing. If it was just a fluffy thing that we could poo-poo away, then people wouldn't um, feel they have to fight so hard against somebody like you who really is just challenging us on what is love and what is abuse, what is spiritual abuse often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know, it's sometimes I feel like I'm it's really hard for people. Here, how can I say this? I feel like people who are like questioning their beliefs or whatever, and they need to change their beliefs. They need to grow, mature, progress. And many of us, and myself included, move to the next level or stage or whatever, and then we start reading maybe heavier books, like maybe as an example, we might move from C.S. Lewis to, say, Rob Bell or something like that. And then we move from Rob Bell to whatever. We're like we progress.
Yeah.
But I feel that the people who are in their various stages judge everything according to that, not realizing that it's not going to be too long. They're going to have to deconstruct where they are already and move on again. But I have people like, whoa, that's too much for me. And they might unfollow or criticize me or whatever, or you've gone too far. And inevitably, many, many people contact me like a year or two later. I take back what I said. I understand what you mean now. Yeah. I'm there. And so I'm just trying to share. I call myself Naked Pastor because I'm sharing my journey. This is my journey. And maybe you can learn from it, but maybe not. That's okay. But I'm sharing my journey and I'm being honest about it and open about it. That's what the naked means, a naked pastor. I'm going to just share my life openly and honestly, and maybe you might benefit from it. And so that's what it's about. And I know for some people I'm too much. I know for some people I'm not enough, Yeah. I've had some atheists say, when are you going to come out finally and claim to be an atheist? And then I have others saying, when are you going to come out and claim that you're a believer or whatever? Like I'm being kind of like the labels thing, or, needing to fall in line or belong to a certain party when I feel I don't belong to any certain party. I can hang out with anybody.
We belong. We don't have to.
We belong.
And it's when you're the epiphany, like the love epiphany, the epiphany of belonging. It takes away the potency of having to label where we belong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I have a cartoon of a bunch of cans on a beach, and they've all got labels on, like agnostic, atheist, believer, etc. But there's one can lying on the beach just sunning itself and just having a good time with a big smile on its face, and it doesn't have a label, and everybody else is freaking out. But what is it, And people do really have that anxiety. It's fear-based of needing to know where you stand so they can know how to talk to you or how to relate to you, or even if they should, So found power.
It is pretty powerful. And so all of these things are just, well, there is the Zen flavor of it all, right? Where we just fall into love, fall into belonging, fall into these things, and it's a pretty magical place to be. Mm-hmm. But it is hard to do. It's heavy lifting until it's not.
Well, love is hard work. I mean, it is work. But they say I was being interviewed by a podcaster from a Latin American country. I think it was Venezuela. And they had like a home group on there. There was several people there. Spanish speaking was really cool. And I said something like, I think love takes a lot of work, and I think hate is lazy. And they said, we have a saying for that. We have a saying for that. And I wish I knew it in Spanish, but it's basically said passion is work and hate is lazy. It's basically, and I really believe that's true. Hate doesn't want to work. It doesn't want to change. It doesn't want to open up. It doesn't want to let down its guard. It wants to cling to what it knows for certain. It's prejudices and biases and opinions and I really do believe that love takes work. Lisa and I, my wife and I, we've been married now 43 years, and it, our marriage is wonderful. Like, we have a wonderful love life, but it takes a lot of work,
Ah,
and but it's worth it, right? It's worth it. And if neither of us put the work in, then it wouldn't work.
yeah.
Uh, so it takes a lot of work. I am kind of rambling here. I was at a I was this is a little while ago, but I was in a living room with a bunch of other couples, a bunch of other people, and married couples and everything. And they were talking about marriage or whatever. And I said, well, how many here have read this book on marriage? And nobody'd even heard of it. And I said, well, has anybody here ever read a book on marriage? Nobody here had read a book on marriage. Anybody here read a book on relationships? No. Anybody here been to a marriage retreat or workshop? No. And anybody here been for couples counseling or no? I was dumbfounded. Like, and I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else, but Lisa and I are so much in love that we thought, like, we want to stay together and we want it to be fun.
Yeah.
So we put the work in. Like, we went to marriage retreats, marriage workshops. We've read all the books. We've been to marriage counseling over and over. Like, we put the work in, and that's why it's working. And I
Yes.
think it's the same in the world. I think it's the same with churches, with LGBTQ plus people, all that. If we put in the work, it's so rewarding because it works.
Yes.
And, if we just put the work in. But hate is lazy. It just rests on its laurels, rests on its orthodoxy, and rests on its tradition, and, rests on its security, and rests on its sameness and
Yes.
boringness. And it's monotonous, oneness, monotonous, one thing over and over and over again, no change, no diversity. And I think that just kills community and relationships.
100%. And that, like, polarizing, requiring sameness disorganizes relationships. So if we expect people to be of the same mind, um, we it's going to evoke a trauma response in people.
Yeah, yeah,
And and I mean, and it's interesting too, like, with all of this, we don't have to make love anything more than what it is, or we don't have to make God more holy or more sovereign or any of these things. But for some reason, there's so many people who claim religion and try to ascribe or just, like, exalt these holy things and make them
right.
more holy. And it's like, that doesn't make things more holy.
No,
Just trusting that we are loved and we're included and we belong, no matter
mm-hmm.
what tribe we're part of in our human condition.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't an easy thing, and it takes work.
It does.
It takes work, like you
Oh,
said with you and Lisa. We just work at it.
yeah. And me learning how to navigate with people I don't agree with, maybe even vehemently, learning how to live together in this world peaceably. It takes work to do that, you know. Kind of like a canoe. If we're going to be facing each other in the canoe, paddling in opposite directions, it's not going to work. We need to figure out where we want to go and how we're going to get there, and then, you know, follow the rules of how that's done. You paddle on that side, I'll paddle on this side, and we'll get there. It's so I think, yeah, there's a lot to consider, but that's what the work is. What do we want together, and then how do we get there?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, because this is what I've been pondering for years, is the word as. And in the context of as passage or part of the Bible, they're talking about loving God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And so I think that, I mean, like, I'm curious if you've thought about that as, or what, say something amazing to me about it, because I want to know what you think.
Yeah.
No
I got
pressure.
cartoons about this where, um, in fact, I have one cartoon that a woman is talking to Jesus and she says, "I'm ready for love. Where do I start?" And he goes, "Yourself." Because that's where it starts. It's like that Zen thing I mentioned a while ago, peace in the world. It actually begins with peace in your heart. And we should know by now, if we have half a brain, we should know that, and if we've done any reading or any research on um, loving others, we need to love ourselves first. And when we learn to love ourselves with all of our strengths and what we think are weaknesses and our light side and our dark side and our shadow, and when we love our past and our present, and we love, when we learn to love ourselves with all of our struggles and temptations and maybe addictions and tendencies and all these kinds of things, that if we can learn to love ourselves, and we're because that's just what love does. Love is love. The way I love myself, it's the same love required to love others. And so that's what that means to me. And when I do that cartoon, I get a surprising amount of kickback for it, where you're supposed to love others first, and we know psychologically now that that's impossible. If you hate yourself,
Yeah.
it's impossible to love other people. You might need them or feel a dependency upon them or whatever, but you can't love others until you love yourself. You can't embrace others until you embrace yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's what that means to me.
That's
It,
beautiful.
sort
I
of,
agree. I
it
agree.
assumes it assumes though that you love yourself.
Yeah.
And if love is an action, then if love is a verb, then what that means is the way we take care of ourselves, we feed ourselves and we water ourselves and we provide shelter for ourselves, and then we should be able to do that for others.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, and I think about this with Thomas Merton as well, which is the surprising secondary part of what we're talking about. But I think he really struggled with loving himself, and at different moments in his lamentations and stuff. And it is a struggle, our humanness, and we sit with our own flaws, and we have our own psychological damage inside of our mind, and all the things that we despise about who we are. And it is hard to trust that we're lovable, but we're loved. We're so lovable. And embracing that does shift this loving your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
That as because if I'm loving my neighbor more than me, it's not real love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Merton's he's a fascinating character, and more's, come out about him, 50 years following his passing. And, that he had a lover,
Mm-hmm.
and S, that's all we know. And who was his nurse, I guess.
Yeah.
And but I remember some stories, like when he met a feminist theologian. Oh, what was her name? I can't remember her name. A feminist theologian, and she pointed out some issues she had with him. And that really, really bugged him. Like, that got under his skin. And then his time with a therapist he had,
Yeah.
that where the therapist challenged him on some things, and that really got under his skin too.
Yeah, he had a
So
hard time.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I just read Jim Forrest's book on Merton, Living with Wisdom. It's a great biography. So he talks a fair bit about those things too. So,
yeah.
but we're all just people like everybody
Well,
else.
that's the thing. Like that's the thing. Like Karl Barth, he's of all the theologians out there, he's the one I admired the most. Like I was a Presbyterian minister, so I studied Reformed theology and all that, and Karl Barth was my favorite theologian, and still is, even though I know there's issues and everything, but I remember just a few years ago when uh his private correspondence was released, and um it was discovered that his personal assistant, Charlotte von Hirschbaum, and he had a full-on affair, were lovers. And everybody knew about it, and his wife knew about it. And there was this sort of a, you know, very, very awkward, uncomfortable triangle happening in his own home. So, and then I remember all of the people. I was a member of a Bart group in Facebook, and so many people said, "That's it, I'm done. I'm done with Bart." And I'm like, there's something very interesting about this, like Merton, and we learned about Henry Nouwen, who was gay. Didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that.
Um, at least I believe that's true. I think so. And his struggle with that, and then Bart and his struggle with,
Yeah.
his wife and his lover, and trying to work that all out. And in the meantime, was a great theologian.
Yeah.
Like, how do you reconcile those things?
Because he loved God. I mean, like yeah. And so we're just people, like my own imperfections, my own list of wrongs
Yeah,
that I have my own book of judgment and you have yours.
yeah,
And so then it's interesting too, because we are always looking for God. I want to be God until I realize that that's what I'm doing. And then hopefully I correct myself and I realize that there is something greater, and love is all these beautiful things that are spiritual practices. But also, I think that, we look at somebody who is so wise and we can put them up on a pedestal to want them to be God. And I think that's what's so great about Merton, even with the Seven Story Mountain and all these books, is his humanity is just like he didn't really hide his humanity.
right.
I think that the church tried to hide it for him because he had to put everything through all of these channels before anything could be
Yeah,
published.
yeah. Imprimatur, the stamp imprimatur. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's something that's really fascinating me lately, though, is how, well, that's a different topic, but how people, like I think Bart rejected being exalted, I think Merton was the same, being, oh, what's the word? Uh, Enchanted. They resisted enchantment. And, you know, what fascinates me though are those who don't, and who can be very enlightened people, very intelligent people, but something happens where people become enchanted with them, and then they become self-enchanted,
Yeah.
and then it becomes a full-on cult or full-blown cult or whatever,
Yeah.
uh, or a very abusive situation, or you know gurus preferring underage girls, and all this
Yeah.
kind of, like, that to me is a very, very, very fascinating world. And I think that's why it's laudable for people like Bart and Nouwen and Merton and people like that who really resisted that the enchantment of others and let
Yeah,
their humanity show. Yeah.
I think that there's a difference there, right? And it does fit in that what is the opposite of loving or love and this power quest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's I mean whatever humanity Henry Nouwen has, or whatever humanity Thomas Merton or Karl Barth or any of these beautiful souls have, is their humanity,
Mm-hmm.
compared to people who are abusing power and doing evil, like violence. So
Mm-hmm.
exploiting children is always violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so it's
That,
different.
yes. So it is fascinating to me, and it is about power, the abuse of power, and how power is given to people, or offered, and where you can either refuse it or receive it. And it reminds me of the temptation story of Jesus, where he was offered power and refused it. And I think that's a very insightful story.
Yeah, it is interesting in so many ways. And oh man, I just would love to talk to you about that story. But it's a whole other big conversation. And you don't often, I mean, what I find really special is you're talking more in a pastoral voice today, and you don't often do that. Like so I don't know, I like it. It's nice. Um, it suits you. It looks good
Okay,
on you.
got to unpack that for me.
Well,
Uh, I'm speaking more in a pastoral voice than I used to, you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And it's good. I mean, even mentioning scripture and things like that. And I don't know, I think that partially for me, I get a little afraid of my Christian worldview. And so, I mean, because with affirming and inclusivity and all these things, there's all these different ways that we're wrestling to
Mhm.
make sure that the message is love. And
Mhm.
so it's nice to to you know the Bible is a good book, and
Yeah.
there's some beautiful things in it. So it's nice to hear you referencing the Bible as well. And I know you're pastor at your roots and pastor in your name.
Yeah, when I left the ministry in 2010, the professional ministry,
Yeah.
um, I really struggled with, should I keep the name Naked Pastor, because I was no longer a real pastor. But it was a real struggle for me because Naked Pastor by that time was a thing and growing. And it's sort of, my cartoons sort of took on a reputation. So I really struggled over that. But over the years, I've had a lot of people tell me, you're still performing a kind of a pastoral role online. And I'm not obeying any certain denomination or anything like that. But I do feel like I am helping others along their spiritual path in some way, which is the role of a pastor.
Yeah.
And so I've decided to keep the name. I don't call myself a pastor, but other people say I'm their pastor, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but uh, because I'm walking in that sort of no man's land of not in the church, but I'm not totally outside the church either. I'm kind of in that in between space where people are passing through, going either way, and I feel I'm there for them. I'm here
Yeah.
for them. People who are like leaving the church or questioning their beliefs, and others who are trying to find a safe space to land, in
Yeah.
a community and so on.
Well, and no man's land is pretty lonely.
Yeah,
And like Merton, he's a great hermit. He is a great monk. But
yeah,
he loved when he got to say mass. And I think there's kind of that energy too when the ministry of psychology and meeting people in their most painful moments. is very similar to what you do as well, right? And it's a lonely kind of work.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Um, but then there's also, yeah. So anyhow, I always like talking to you,
Thank you.
David, and we should probably wind things down. I feel like we could talk for about 7 hours today.
Well, maybe one day we'll hang out.
Yeah, I'm gonna come out. I'm gonna come out. I was talking to Brad about it, so I'm trying to figure out when I'll come out to the SSU campus out there. So I'll make
Oh,
sure I look
wow.
in.
If you do that, you're just an hour away. I could come
Yeah,
down and
yeah. I want to meet Lisa too. She seems really fabulous.
she is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a right answer.
she totally is. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I just without a doubt.
Yeah, that's a great way to be. I feel that way in my marriage too. It's nice to work hard for something that to have a companion.
Yeah. I mean, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. It's just makes sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. And I just always appreciate talking to you and learning from you.
Thank
And
you.
it's just really nice to sit in this expanse with somebody else. And I have called you my pastor at times. You were somebody that I needed in my lonely places. So thank you.
Oh, well, my pleasure. Good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thank you so much. Next time.